So I could say int minutes equals 0, and then I can write a whole program in here. Actually, why don't we just write a little program so you can see how it works. I want to print something to the screen. I want to print a string out. I would type system.out line and then parentheses, and let's say hello, right? You notice that the S in system is capitalized. It's very important to remember that S's start with a capital S. What this is actually, or you start with a capital letter. System has a capital S, so you know that this is the system class, and you're using the out line method. And in parentheses here, this is actually your parameter that you're sending to the output line, the print line method. So if I do this, you would think that this would work. I can click the little green arrow here to run my program. If this pops up the first time, you'll just say you want to save it when you try to run it. Oh, there's an error. Where's the error? Aha. I have to put a semicolon after every command. Important for you to remember. Fortunately, it points it out for you. I will click OK. And, whoa, nothing happened. Why is that? Well, I don't actually call I actually don't call the constructor from the main method. Basically, all you're going to do from the main method is you're going to say, hey, start the constructor. So I will say I want a new challenge at 1. And that tells the program, okay, go from main down to challenge set 1 here. I'm just going to check mark always save resources before launching. That makes it easier for me. And look, now I've got hello. So that's a basic way to create a program. Say, though, that rather than printing out a word, I want it to print out a variable. Well, what types of variables are there? There are several that we're going to use right off the bat anyway. One is a Boolean, and all a Boolean is it's true or false. So I have a Boolean, that's the type, and the name of my Boolean is going to be my bool equals true. If I tell system.out.println to print my bool, it will print out. Right. Sometimes I forget the semicolon. I think you probably will too. It will print out true. If I tell it to print out my bool in quotes, it won't print true. It'll print out my bool. Remember, if you're trying to print a variable, you want to not use quotes. What other types of variables are there? Well, there's int, which we already discussed. It's an integer, a whole number. Int int 1 equals 5. And then if I want, oh, by the way, there's a nice little shortcut in Eclipse that allows you to quickly type out .out.println since you use it so much. Type this out and control spacebar. It puts the whole thing out there for you. So it makes it a little bit faster. So I want to print out int 1 and hit play, and you'll see I've got true and 5. Note that I'm doing this after every line of code. I'm doing that in part to check to see if there are errors. So you shouldn't be writing more than like 10 or 15 lines of code right now without testing it to make sure that it works, or at least no more than a single method. Don't write out all your methods and then try to figure out what's wrong with it. Anyway, back to variables. Now, say you want decimals, then you have to use either a float or a double. A float is just a decimal number that's shorter than a double. So like a double has, I think, twice as many places as a float. There's not really any reason that you need to use a float as far as I'm concerned. So use a double. The double number 2 equals 3.14159. and then sits out number 2. And there's my float. R is a single character, meaning like a B or a pound sign, or number 1 is also a character, but it's only one character, right? Let's say I do an exclamation point. Oh, maybe it's not an exclamation point. Not in quotes, maybe. Okay, I forget how chars work. I'll tell you later. It's not really important right now. You've got strings, and for a string, let's make a string called character 1. Notice that string also starts with a capital letter. Once again, if it starts with a capital letter, it's actually an object. So strings are an object type, whereas all of the other stuff, a char, a double, an int, a boolean, a float, those are called primitive types. Basically, primitive types are very simple. They don't do much other than, hold a, like, say, okay, it's true or false, or it's a number, or it's a letter. Whereas strings are an object type, and they can actually do a lot more. There are different methods that you can run on your string type. So we've got a string called sentence, and it equals a string. Semicolon. Sorry. And of course, I have to change this to sentence. And there you see, this is a string. Those are the basic types that you need to know about. What else do you need to know right off the bat? Well, I suppose you should know about operators. Like in Python, you can things to numbers. So for instance, let's create a second integer. Int 2 equals, and you can this out 1 plus int, and if I did it properly, that equals 11, right? So 2 integers added together, you can multiply them together, and hopefully that's 30. Yep. You can divide one by the other, or actually subtract one from the other, so -1, or divide, and oh, that's 0. Why is 5 divided by 6 0? Well, because it's an integer and not a float. With an integer, you just strip off whatever is after the decimal point. So 5 divided by 6 is what, like 1 point something, or 0.1 something. Or sorry, 0.8 or something. So, at 7:45 in the morning, my math is not so good. Anyway, it's 0 point something. Whereas, because it's an integer, we just say, okay, that's 0. If you want it to have decimal place, Python used to just say, okay, you're dividing one integer by another, and that's some sort of decimal number, so I'm just going to assume you want to float now. In this case, you have to tell it, I want to turn this into a float. So you have to do something called casting, which means, well, basically what you'd want to do, the easy way for you to handle this right now, and the way that I remember, is you would say, like, float number 3. Well, you do something called casting, and you don't need to handle that now. I'll talk about it later. I realize that this is already running long, and my memory is not as good as it should be. So let's move on to outputting text. We've already got that. So already we can add numbers together, multiply them by each other. If you want to divide these two numbers together by each other, for now, the simple way to do it is just to say, okay, this is not an int, it's a float, and then it'll give you 0.833. One other useful thing that you should know is if you're doing a loop, you know how in Python you had a counter like, number, every time you go through the loop, number equals number plus 1. Well, you can do int 1 equals int 1 plus 1, and in that case that would be 5 plus, so this integer here equals what the value used to be, which is 5 plus 1. So now it equals 6. But you can also just say int 1 plus, and what that means is add 1 old value of integer 5, integer 1, and that would also equal 6. You can also do int minus minus, and that just means it's minus 1. If you don't understand how this works, remember that everything on the left of the equal sign is what variable that's assigned a value, and the part on the right is what you want to assign. So this is a variable name. Okay, we're going to assign some new value to integer 1. The stuff on the right side of the equal sign is going to be what the variable's value is presently, so 5 plus 1. So you fill in, okay, I know that integer 1 is 5 as of right now, so that value plus 1 equals the variable. So now int 1 equals 6 as of this line. The other thing that you need to know how to do right off the bat is how to take input. So I've asked you to ask the user to type in a number. That is much more complicated in Java than it is in Python. Python intended to make stuff like that easier, and I think they did. In Java, you actually have to import a package. Now, what importing does is there's all sorts of useful functionality in Java that you need to access sometimes, but not all the time. And if you had all of that built into every Java program would be